The water cycle is a biogeochemical cycle that involves the movement of water through various reservoirs such as oceans, atmospheres, rivers, lakes, and groundwater. The cycle includes processes like evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and runoff. Each of these processes interacts with different ecological environments. As for oceans, they act as a major reservoir where evaporation takes place, leading to the formation of clouds. The water vapor is then transported through the atmosphere, eventually condensing and precipitating as rain over oceans. As for rivers and lakes, these freshwater bodies play a crucial role in the water cycle by receiving precipitation and runoff. They act as ecological reservoirs, supporting diverse ecosystems. Aquatic plants, algae, and various organisms are intricately linked to the water cycle within these environments. And as for water, water infiltrates the soil and replenishes said groundwater, contributing to underground reservoirs. Aquifers serve as ecological reservoirs for various organisms and are essential for maintaining terrestrial ecosystems. So as for humans, we also make mistakes, unfortunately, and these are the anthropogenic effects. Human activities have significant impacts on the water cycle, altering natural processes and ecological balances. Excessive withdrawal of water for agricultural, industrial, and domestic purposes can disrupt the natural flow of rivers and deplete groundwater reserves. The release of pollutants into water bodies affects water quality and can have cascading effects on aquatic ecosystems. This includes chemicals, nutrients, and contaminants from industrial discharges, agricultural, and urban runoff. And lastly, anthropogenic activities contribute to climate change, affecting precipitation patterns and intensifying extreme weather events. This, in turn, influences the water cycle dynamics. But let's not forget about invasive species, as it can disrupt the water cycle and ecological balance in aquatic environments. Invasive species, such as certain plants or animals, can outcompete native species, disrupting the natural balance within ecosystems. This can affect nutrient cycling and water quality. And invasive species may also alter the physical characteristics of water bodies, affecting the availability of resources and the flow of water. This can impact the overall water cycle in affected areas. But regardless of the stresses that it applies to add tension to our ecosystem, there are epigenetic changes that can influence how organisms respond to environmental cues, including variations in water availability. Epigenetics modifications can play a role in the adaptation of organisms to changing water conditions. For example, certain aquatic plants may undergo epigenetic changes to cope with variations in water availability. And epigenetic changes can be passed down from one generation to the next, potentially influencing the response of organisms to water-related stressors over multiple generations.
Welcome to our informative video where we dive into intricate web of the water cycle and explore the anthropogenic stressor that disrupts this delicate balance. Today, I'll be discussing these effects through the lens of the Chatelier principle from an anthropogenic perspective.
To begin, let's unravel the fundamental processes of the water cycle. Nature has its own way of maintaining equilibrium, but human activities have introduced disruptions. Enter the anthropogenic perspective, human-induced changes from deforestation to industrial emission. We've altered landscape and atmosphere, influencing the water cycle. Now, let's apply the Chatellier's principle to understand how the system responds to these changes. Just as the principle predicts shifts in chemical equilibrium, the water cycle adjusts to maintain balance in the face of anthropogenic stress. Consider deforestation. Removing trees reduces transpiration, impacting evaporating rates. Chatellier's principle helps us to comprehend how the water cycle compensates for this disturbance. Urbanization alters surfaces, creating impermeable areas. Rainfall patterns change, leading to increased runoff. Chatellier's principle helps us grasp the adjustments in precipitation and runoff dynamics. Industrial activities release pollutants that can alter atmospheric conditions. Chatellier's principles guides us in understanding how these changes influence precipitation, forming acid rain and affecting water quality. Global warming, a consequences of anthropogenic activities, accelerates the water cycle. Chatellier's principle aids in comprehending the shifts in temperature, evaporation rates, and subsequent impact on sea levels.
As we wrap our exploration, remember that understanding the water cycle response to anthropogenic stress through the Chatelier principle empowers us to make informed decisions for a sustainable future. Let's work together to ensure the harmonious coexistence with our planet's essential water system.
Within the complex processes of the Earth's water cycle, A growing concern arises due to the unintentional introduction of invasive species, consequence of human activity. This discussion aims to shed light on the implications of anthropogenic actions on the delicate balance of the water cycle, with a specific focus on adverse influence exerted by invasive species. These organisms are introduced into new environments and significantly disrupts the established equilibrium and dynamics of the Earth's ecosystem. Now, imagine the water cycle as a well-organized system, and the invasive species are the disruptors of it, introducing irregularities and altering the natural functioning of water bodies. Their arrival often leads to the changes in the physical structure of aquatic ecosystems. It affects sedimentation patterns and modifies the dynamic of water flow. Furthermore, these invasive species disturb nutrient cycling, leading to imbalances that can affect the overall health and sustainability of aquatic environments. The decline in biodiversity resulting from these invaders preying upon the native organisms initiates an effect that affects the interconnected web of life within these ecosystems. So, a heightened awareness and collective efforts are crucial to mitigate the adverse impacts of invasive species on our valuable water resources.
Epigenetics. Epigenetic mechanisms can affect an organism's response to environmental stressors related to the water cycle because they alter gene expression without changing the underlying DNA sequence. For instance, epigenetic modifications affecting the expression of genes involved in stress responses, metabolism, and development in aquatic animals might be brought on by exposure to contaminants or variations in water supply. Further generations may inherit these epigenetic modifications, which could influence how well populations adjust to environmental shifts related to the water cycle. In conclusion, there is a close relationship between the water cycle in aquatic habitats and ecological dynamics and biogeochemical cycles. Intricate interplay between biological processes, environmental changes, and human activities in aquatic ecosystems is highlighted by the potential influence of invasive species, anthropogenic effects, and epigenetic mechanisms on the water cycle.